consider if America could really handle another Trump presidency. That question is suddenly plausible in part because of the less-than-stirring launch of the Biden re-election campaign. Both his age and his running mate will be real hurdles. Why is Vice President Kamala Harris so polarizing? We will analyze. And another familiar name in D.C., well, it is Ted Cruz. The Texas Republican senator recently exploded on a reporter at the southern border. We'll see if Ted's rhetoric actually matches his record when it comes to immigration. Also today, we're joined by the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires to talk about our economic climate. What happens if the lunatics on Capitol Hill actually follow through on their threat and take us over the debt limit cliff? We discuss the petrifying consequences. All that and much more coming up in the next 60 minutes. To start us off, here's Thom Hartmann.
This whole question of Donald Trump and what he's doing and how it's working and all this sort of stuff, basically the crimes he has committed against America, I think are really consequential. Chris Cillizza this morning points out that, in his town hall, he suggested that it was fortunate, well, actually in his deposition, that stars have been able to grab women by their private parts for millions of years. He reiterated that in his town hall. He praised January 6th as a beautiful day. He called a black police officer a thug, something that he constantly calls black people thugs. It's his word for black person. He referred to E. Jean Carroll as a whack job, to applause from the audience, by the way. He said the Republicans should allow the country to default on its debt. Brilliant. He refused to say whether Ukraine should win the war with Russia. He refused to say whether Putin was a war criminal. He admitted that he purposely removed classified documents. He refused to say if he'd concede in 2024 if he loses the election. And he suggested that tearing children from their parents at the border is a good thing. Meanwhile, we're seeing, PTSD being developed by Republicans. There's a fascinating story in the Washington Post in which Bill Gates, not the billionaire, but the lifelong Republican member of the Arizona Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, a county commissioner basically in Arizona, lifelong Republican, and he was one of the guys who certified the election for Joe Biden in Arizona. And as a result, Donald Trump's people just went on a rampage against him and his children and his wife, awful stuff. As members of Congress, this is from the Washington Post, about 1,000 Trump loyalists protested, this was on January 6th, 2001, protested outside the state capitol in Phoenix, where they erected a guillotine. They were carrying rifles. Gates watched on television in disbelief as rioters climbed the U.S. Capitol steps. What he had mistaken as tough talk was actually the impetus of a violent attempt to overthrow the government. Gates worried his family may not be safe in their home. They had labeled him a traitor, and he was worried that a mob might come for him. He said he began suffering PTSD on the heels of this. He was told he was a traitor who should be hanged. Another person said he should be shot. One person said that his daughters were going to be raped as his punishment. He worried that his Fox News watching parents were turning against him. His usual cheerfulness and optimism evaporated. He started to lose sleep. He lost his appetite. He began to question his own worth. His wife said she no longer recognized him. His daughters stopped asking him for help with their problems. He was consumed by feelings of abandonment over his strained relationships with his fellow Republicans. And eventually, in May of last year, he sought therapy. He had developed high blood pressure, anxiety, headaches, and insomnia. He said, "I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the most dynamic speaker, but I was always, honest. I had integrity. They've taken that away from me forever." They, Donald Trump. Are you experiencing PTSD from this? And and particularly think of the impact that this is having on people of color and religious and gender minorities. Kansas right now, the Republican Party in Kansas, the Wichita Eagle reports that Mike Brown, who is the chairman of the party, is trying to remove from the leadership of the Kansas Republican Party the heads of the Kansas Republican National Hispanic Assembly and the Kansas Black Republican Council. To, a group of black Republicans and Hispanic Republicans. He wants them out. Nothing but white people here in Kansas. That's it. We're the GOP. We only want white people, he's saying. Meanwhile, down in Florida, the Florida State Education Department just pulled 2 more books from high school curriculum, both on the Holocaust. One is called Modern Genocides. It also has an online learning course, and the other is called History of the Holocaust. Again, for high school students. And, but in Florida, they don't want kids learning about this, apparently. I mean, this has just got to be really tough. I'm an old white guy, an old straight white guy at that. And I can get what kind of pain people who are gay or lesbian or trans or black or Hispanic or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu must be experiencing in Trump's America. Anyway, we'll be right back.
I'm Elizabeth Hagedorn, and I'm the State Department correspondent at Al Monitor.
And I'm Joe Snell. I'm Al Monitor's video editor. Let's admit it, this past year has been difficult to stay on top of the news and sift through what's accurate and what's misleading. Let Al Monitor help you.
If you like this podcast and care about the Middle East and North Africa, you should consider listening to Al Monitor's other audio series, On the Middle East with Andrew Parasalidi and Amberin Zaman, and On Israel with Ben Caspi. You can subscribe to these series on your favorite podcast platforms.
And through a host of free daily and weekly newsletters, we offer a range of perspectives with the highest journalistic standards. You can subscribe to these newsletters at almonitor.com.
As an award-winning media service headquartered in Washington, D.C., Al Monitor has a network of over 160 contributors around the world.
So if you haven't done so already, be sure to visit almonitor.com, where you can find all of these newsletters and podcasts along with first-class reporting and analysis.
Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. I hope you'll join me on my new audio podcast, Justice Matters. I'll be using my 30 years as a federal prosecutor and Army JAG to unpack, break down, and explain the legal issues of the day, particularly where the legal intersects with the political. Please look for Justice Matters with Glenn Kirshner wherever you generally get your podcasts.
As a career wide receiver, I've been hit hard. But no training nor practice prepared us for the devastation of COVID-19. Thankfully, there is hope. Even with multiple vaccines available, we still have to work together until everyone is safe. We all win when we unite to prevent.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade. It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and health care benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.
Welcome back. We are edging ever closer to the debt limit cliff, and certain Republicans in Congress seem to actually be cheering for that outcome. Rick Smith brings in Morris Pearl, who's chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, on to discuss what might happen if the unthinkable becomes a reality. Here's Rick.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
So evidently the big debt ceiling meeting that was scheduled on Friday postponed. Not quite sure why. I'm sure they're deciding their tactics. Maybe that's it, or maybe the ice cream melted. I don't know. What is interesting though is the newspaper of the investor class, the Wall Street Journal, reported that Moody's Analytics is saying that if we default, more than 7 million jobs could be lost. Unemployment could be above 8%, and basically wiping out all of the progress we've made over the last couple of years. Now, the weird thing is there are some giddy over the idea that we could make Biden look bad. I'm not in that category. This is stupid. This should have been already done by now. But we've got to go through this exercise in here to share some thoughts on just how bad this could be. I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires. Patrioticmillionaires.org is their website if you want to check out their work. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, great to be in your show, Rick.
So
great to be here.
The newspaper of the investor class is saying, hey, if we default, potentially 7 million jobs lost, over 8% unemployment, pain, suffering, chaos. Why are we even talking about touching this button? Why are we talking about defaulting at all?
There are a bunch of people in the country who basically don't think it's right that the government is doing things to help people. They want to go back to the good old days when they think America was great again, in like the 1850s, when the government didn't do much of anything. And I don't think that I would prefer to live in today, not 1850.
Yeah, I wasn't around back then, so I don't know.
America was very different.
Most certainly it was. You know, most of the people that I talk to think the 1950s were the great period of time, without understanding that there was a lot of government investment. We had extremely high tax rates. It was a very different country. It was more of a we country than a hooray for me and the heck with everybody else country.
A we country for, white guys like our parents and grandparents. Not so much for, black people, Latino people, Chinese people. The Chinese Exclusion Act was still in place. Mortgages were only available in racially heterogeneous neighborhoods, meaning all white. We expanded our country a great deal, not by bringing more people, but by including the people we already had. And that's part of the reason we had this great bull market through the 1960s and 70s, even with inflation picking up. We've had a great run. And some people don't like that. They don't like the fact that there's lots of other people doing as well as they are. They think that they deserve to be special somehow because, I don't know, God sent white people to this country to kill all the Native Americans and take over. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird story when you try and drill down to it. But the sad reality is we've been trained over these last 40, 50 years that it's all about me and it's not about we. And look, you're right. The 1950s, we did have divisions, but even in those communities, there was a sense of we. One of the things we learned about when we did our civil rights tour is, we were down in Jackson, Mississippi, where they had a Black Wall Street, where there was tons of Black-owned businesses, there was tons of community, there were things that people were brought together and were fighting together to make better lives, and somehow we screwed that up too.
Yeah, we certainly did. The first use of aerial bombardment was the white people destroying the black neighborhoods in Tulsa, Oklahoma, around 100 years ago. I'm hoping that we don't go back, that these, white supremacists who are talking about replacement theory realize that they're actually better off with a diverse society, with everyone participating, with lots of customers who can buy stuff and participate in the economy.
No, what's interesting to me, Morris, is I watched the town hall thing with Trump, and one of the things that my Trump supporter friends have always told me about him, he's a businessman. He's a businessman first. He's a great businessman. That's what they tell me. Whether it's true or not, we can debate that for days. But he came out yesterday and said that he wants to see the country default, which, you're a business person. Does that make any business sense whatsoever? Would any business person in this country go, yeah, that would be good for business?
I cannot think of any possible reason. Maybe if you're a Russian oligarch or a Chinese oligarch or something, you might be better off if the United States really, if the United States economy is really destroyed. I can't think of any other class of people in the world who would actually prefer that.
Do you agree with?
It's just a sad thing.
No, it's insane to me. But do you agree with Moody's Analytics and their assessment that we could lose 7 million jobs and unemployment rate be over 8%? Could it be that bad?
It could. I was on a webinar with Mark Zandi. Our Zoom boxes were next to each other. We're actually in different places, but just the other day, if the borrowing authority is not increased, then the government will run out of money, whether it's 4 weeks from now or 6 weeks from now, whatever, but it will happen. They'll run out of money. I think there's a couple of possibilities. One is the President of the United States, President Biden, could declare that he was ordered by law to spend this money, and he's going to spend the money and have them print dollars or make coins or something. Technically, the debt limit only applies to paper money, not coins. So they can do that. They could do, a few other crazy things to just sort of say that the whole debt limit thing is a moot point. I don't know if he wants to. I don't think he wants to, but he'd prefer having that limit extended, but he could do that. And then if they don't do that, they'll run out of money. It'll be like if you don't have any money in your checking account, you can't buy any more stuff. Tax revenue comes in, but it's only half, 2/3 of what they were ordered by law to spend by the laws that Congress has passed for this year's budget. So they're going to have to spend less stuff. And it'll start with places with lots of government workers not getting paid. They can still work. The government still has authority to pay them. It just doesn't have any money.
Right.
It won't have any money at that particular moment. So it'll start with, and all of a sudden, guys who own bars in front of military bases won't have any business because no one will have any beer money. Pretty soon it'll hit hospitals. The actual hospital workers won't be making their rent. Their landlords won't have any money. They won't be making their car payments. The car dealers won't be selling any cars. And it'll expand through the whole economy in the course of a month or two. If all of a sudden the government stops paying literally millions of people and millions of contractors and lots of people get laid off, I mean, it'll be an expanding recession, depression within, I don't know, a couple of months, I guess.
So, but what do you say to the person, Morris, who goes, well, you just said yourself, we don't have the money. The money's not coming in. We're spending more than we have. We shouldn't do that. And this is the way that we're going to stop doing this. What do you say to that argument?
Well, the fact is, the things that we call money, these dollar bills that we have in our pockets that we pay for stuff with, the government creates more of them from time to time. And some of them are these dollar bills we carry around, and some of them are these things called T-bills that they issue that are promises for more dollar bills. And when you're dealing with someone who is allowed to print their own money, the US government and the Fed, a promise to give you money is the same thing as actual money, because all money is just a promise of something. The dollar bills aren't really worth anything in themselves,
right?
Just a paper. They're a promise that you can use them to buy stuff. And so are the bills and the notes and the bonds and all these other things the government creates. So essentially what the government is doing every year. It's taking in a bunch of money with taxes, and it's sending out more money. Essentially, it's creating more money. The total number of dollars in existence is going up. It's been going up every year almost for, 100 years or so. And essentially, that's what they're saying they don't like. They don't like the fact that the number of dollars in existence is increasing. But it has to increase. We have more people. We do more stuff. People want raises. So the total amount of money in the money supply has to go up every year. That's why we went off the gold standard years ago. That's why Democrats from William Jennings Bryan on have been arguing that we need a flexible currency and not a gold standard or something like that with a fixed amount of dollars.
Let me ask you about that, because I get a lot of my conservative friends who want to go back to the gold standard. They have, someone told them something that this might be better. What would happen if we were on the gold standard? Would it harm our growth? Would we not be able to expand our economy? Would it mean less?
Well,
What would it mean?
It would mean not having any growth unless people found more gold mines. And I would prefer having government officials who report to our elected, the people we elect by voting, deciding on monetary policy, not gold miners. Essentially, it would mean we put gold miners in charge of making monetary policy, and there'd be no growth. There was a time when we were on the gold standard when farmers who were having very profitable farming operations could not borrow money because their banks didn't have any gold, even though they were growing crops and stuff that they could sell. But if you don't have any gold, you can't buy anything. And the amount of gold was fixed. As we were having more, as the country was expanding, there wasn't enough gold to buy stuff, even though we had more stuff. So it essentially made deflation in gold. And that's not what we want. We don't want to run out of money even when we have stuff to sell, and even when people have jobs where they can earn money, but there's no one has any. That's not good. That's what causes recessions and depressions. And that's why we went off the gold standard, and so is every other civilized country in the world, many years ago. I don't want to put gold miners in charge of our official monetary policy. I don't think that would work well at all.
No, I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show, where Morris Pearl. Morris is the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org. This is the website if you want to check out the work that they do. Now, I've had people tell me that they believe the U.S. economy is like a business, but it's a Ponzi scheme now, and no serious investor would invest in the U.S. I've had people tell me this because our debt to GDP ratio is so high. You're actually an investor. You're someone who does this. Does that argument hold any water with you?
Well, I spend U.S. dollars. I live in my apartment here. I have to pay our maintenance fees. They used to pay the doorman and stuff in U.S. dollars. So I need U.S. dollars. That's what I use when I buy stuff. And it's not a Ponzi scheme because the government is allowed to create U.S. dollars. So they're not going to run out. And it's kind of like the argument, it'd be kind of like arguing that, American Airlines can't issue any more frequent flyer points because they're going to run out. They're not going to run out of frequent flyer points. They might run out of seats on the planes, so they'll have to stop eventually, but they're not going to run out of points, the actual numbers they put in your accounts.
Well, they need to get more planes. So that's the other part of this for me.
And the government has to get more taxpayers, but they do. Our economy, our population is expanding. Every year we have more people with jobs. Every year we have more people making stuff and doing stuff. And factories are making more cars. Farmers are growing more stuff. People are working more hours because there's more people. So the government is, in that analogy, getting more airplanes and more seats and stuff. And they have to expand the number of dollars. The same way the airline, if they get more airplanes and more customers and more everything, they need more points. It's the same idea.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, because we're trained to believe that the government operates just like we operate in our homes at the kitchen table. If we don't have enough money coming in, we can't spend it. You're arguing that that's not reality. That's not how the economy works. Because some people say, look, we should balance our budgets. We shouldn't spend as much. I argue we should raise taxes and bring more revenue in. Is there a way forward in this, given how we've been kind of trained like Pavlovian dogs to see debt and foam?
I think you've been trained a little bit wrong, but it's hard to say that because it's true for almost everybody else. It's true for your state governments. They can't spend more money than they take in. It's true for your brother-in-law. He can't spend more money than he makes a living. But it's not true for people who print their own money. And fortunately, the United States has never defaulted, and people all over the world have trust in U.S. dollars.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. We are radio of, for, and by we the working people. Check out our program at thericksmithshow.com.
I'm Chef Shanti, and today we're going to make Cinnamon Toast Crunch French toast.
In today's Middle East, the issues are getting more complex and the noise is getting louder. It takes a lot more to really understand what's going on. Al Monitor has established itself as an independent and trusted pulse of the Middle East, providing angles that you won't see anywhere else. We have committed to hiring hundreds of the top journalists and experts from across the region to keep our audiences up to date on the latest news and the trends to watch for. Decision makers on foreign policy and international business, global media, and top regional authorities regularly read Al Monitor, making it a one-stop shop for gaining a better grasp of the Middle East. And now, with the launch of Al Monitor Pro, we're using our expert network and new datasets to offer premium, actionable insights business and policy professionals around the world. Pro offers expert memos, data-driven trend reports, industry monitoring, and special events covering trade and investment, energy, technology, food security, and more to help analysts do their job better. Join our community as we continue to grow.
If you have not heard of the Sexy Liberal Podcasting Network, your podcasting superstation, you suck. I mean, yes. We have the smartest, funniest liberals in the country. Stephanie Miller's Happy Hour. We have John Fugelsang. We have Hal Sparks, Frangela, Final Word, and Idiot of the Week. We have Bob Seska. Oh my God. We have Jody Hamilton from The Bunker. We have Start Me Up with Kimberly Johnson. We have Unprecedented. We have the smartest, funniest podcast, period. Get it now. SexyLiberal.com.
In this segment, Travis Bone welcomes Cliff Schechter to the program. The two talk Ted Cruz and the border. Here's Travis.
I don't know how anybody believes. I mean, Trump actually, like when he says stuff, as much as I loathe Trump, you can maybe believe that he means it. Ted Cruz, when he talks, he doesn't sound like he actually even believes himself.
He's a full poser is what he is.
I'm sorry?
He's a full-on poser. It's like nothing about him seems real. It was kind of like how he grew. I feel like I went back and looked recently. They showed the clip of him after Trump made fun of Heidi back during the 2016 election. And that was Ted Cruz without the beard at that point. And I feel like he grew the beard in after that, so like maybe we wouldn't recognize him as the same spineless sack of crap.
Maybe he was trying to look a little more alpha. I don't know.
But you know what he looked up looking like? Do you guys watch Cheers back in the day?
Sure.
Yeah.
Remember when they had a beard growing contest and Cliff Clavin couldn't grow it?
Yes.
So he actually went and he got the industrial glue.
Yep.
Because all these patches all over his face.
Yep.
I mean, it's not even a real beard. If Ted Cruz is trying to look more alpha, he should really maybe glue some hair to his face. It's like a patch up here, a patch up here, a little bit down. Like, he looks ridiculous.
He does.
Make him look like the werewolf. That'd be great.
Well, he already looks like a werewolf. A werewolf who's
like
mid-change.
Like mid-transition.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's right. He's transitioning.
Yes.
We should talk about that.
Ted Cruz is transitioning to be a werewolf. Well, while we're talking about Ted, let's keep on going with this. Some more clips from this.
Here we go.
So he was holding his press conference down at the border.
Again.
And the reporter asked a legitimate question, and basically Ted Cruz's response was to be a D.
This is why, like, when people try to make things, oh, you're being partisan, and it's like, I don't want to be partisan. They make me partisan.
Mm-hmm.
There was a part of the Republican Party. In fact, I even wrote a book critical of John McCain.
You did.
I think you got
Yep.
back in 2008. God, what I'd give for him now compared to the rest of these.
Yeah.
It's scary, right?
But McCain was one of the few people who stood up, and actually George W. Bush, and supported wholeheartedly immigration reform. And it was an immigration reform bill that could appeal to all sides. It had things about penalties and a period of time over which you would have to pay back taxes and do all of this to become a citizen. And companies would be punished who were hiring people that were undocumented. And some of that money would be used, and they would strengthen the security at the border. It had everything in it. It got 67 Senate votes, including Lindsey Graham, who he didn't even faint on his couch that day. It was a good day for him. And but the House blocked it, the Republican House. And they've used this as an issue. We could have fixed this. I mean, would it be perfect? No, but their so-called border, which, by the way, the border crossings have gone down. So it's all just fake, like everything else. They say they're lying. But any crisis that is going on, if a few people are being held there, in lockup because they're trying to cross the border to get a better life, that's, to me, a crisis of humanity.
Yeah.
And we should be doing something to fix that. And we had that sitting there. But the Republicans, like with abortion, although that backfired on them, like with assault rifles, like with so many other things, would rather have an issue than a solution.
Yeah.
They want these problems, or they've got nothing to run on.
No, we've been saying that all morning, and that's true for the border. That's true for the debt ceiling. Like, even they kind of given up on the ACA because they've realized that it's a losing issue for them because people like it.
Right.
But even when the AC was still in play, they would use that to the hilt. But again, there was no solution for it. And that's why John McCain, to his credit, voted against the repeal that they had because they had no replacement for it.
No, they kept saying it's like that question that I guess that was a reporter asked Ted Cruz, like, you've been here 11 years. What have you been doing? What he's been doing is, of course, demagoguing and lying and getting up and reading Green Eggs and Ham on the floor and getting it wrong, and going to Cancun, sneaking off with his little pot belly and his little roly-poly suitcase of his. Oh, I think I need to be quiet.
No. Keep going. I'm just giving. Chris just stole third.
Nice, Chris. When you're running off to Cancun and you're demagoguing and lying about everything, I guess there's not a lot of time to actually engage in policy.
Right.
But they had a policy, and the other senator, by the way, from Texas, who I loathe too, John Cornyn, originally had signed on to that bill. He voted for that bill too, to reform immigration. Like, we had the votes, but the House blocked it because of right-wing nuts in the House. And sadly, some of those nuts in the House have made their way up to the Senate and corrupted that institution too. And I mean, all these problems, if we could find 10 reasonable Republicans, could be solved tomorrow.
Yeah.
All of them. Guns, abortion rights. I mean, even if they said, we'll only meet you in the middle somewhere, and we're going to, this is not something I'd be for, but I'd take anything around and say, we'll guarantee abortion up to 12 or 15 weeks. Obviously, I would keep fighting after to expand that. But even if they were willing to meet somewhere, but they're not. And they're not willing to meet somewhere on guns, and they're liars and they're demagogues.
I feel weird being in a room full of men saying this, but there was one of the female senators, I can't remember which one it was now, Wisconsin. Who's the female senator from
Tammy Baldwin?
Tammy Baldwin was on one of the Sunday shows, and they brought up the idea to her, and I think it's something that she's on board with. She said that she would consider a 20-week ban as long as there were rules in there for the health of the mother, the viability of the child, and take all of these safety because basically when you start talking about a 20-week ban, then you're getting more into Roe v. Wade territory, because I don't know if people always think about the fact that Roe v. Wade, they balanced it saying the further along the woman is in the pregnancy, the more the life of the child becomes a factor in that. And that 20-week ban starts to play into that idea because most women will know by 20 weeks if they want to have an abortion or not. And they'll also know these situations like whether the fetus is developing properly, if there's going to be health issues.
Do you know how many women had late term? I always like to educate folks about this because they lie about it. They grab have late term abortions in this country. It's 0.03%.
Yeah.
Basically, it is if you are in a situation where your health is going to grievously be injured or you're going to die.
Right.
So I'm going to retract something I said earlier, not 12 weeks, that's too soon. But if it was something in the 15 to 20 week range, again, I would fight for fully to get Roe v. Wade back and more.
Yep.
But in the meantime, if they're willing to compromise on something like a 15 to 20 week, range, preferably 20, at least I'm all about public health, saving lives, and then you fight the next day for more. If they're willing to agree on the most basic things that they say, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Well, if that's true, then you'd want to do an effing background check on the person.
You want to make sure people don't have guns.
You want to have red flag laws to take a gun away from the person.
Right.
So that line only works if you're arguing against an assault rifle ban or something like that. It doesn't work for all the other things that they're against because they're liars.
Right.
And if they want to find compromise ground on a bunch of these things, it's right there. I would still fight for more. I'd fight for Roe. I'd fight for a full assault rifle ban. And all of that. But there's and the immigration one is one I think there was more agreement on than almost any of these other things in this. I mean, the Senate, they got almost 70 votes.
Yeah.
When does that happen?
That doesn't happen anymore on any issue.
Right.
And like on immigration, I just want to wrap up. We've got one last one with Ted Cruz here because to the point you were talking about, like he's a do-nothing person in Congress. And listen really carefully what he says here at the end of this.
I'm going to answer his question. The talking point of the Democrats, which this media reporter happily parrots, is, gosh, the problem can't be fixed. There's one little problem with that. It is an utter and complete lie. In 2020, the last year of the Trump presidency, we had the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. You ask, what have I done? I've championed the men and women of Border Patrol. I've championed securing the border. I've championed Remain in Mexico.
He's championed.
Yeah.
He's championed remaining in Mexico because he wants to be in Cancun all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? The 2020 line, I can't think. What was going on in 2020?
Yeah, what was happening there?
Was it Trump? Or was there an international pandemic that may have slowed down people who were putting themselves in that position? I mean, he's just, every word out of his mouth is a lie.
Yeah.
He's just a human. I mean, when that producer who did Last of Us and the nuclear Chernobyl, Craig Mason, who was stuck being his roommate at Princeton, was just like, he's the most evil, awful human being ever. Like, his wife gets insulted, he doesn't defend her. His own daughters refuse to hug him in a picture. Two of his colleagues, I think, endorsed him for the presidency because they found him more loathsome than Donald Trump.
No.
I think that kind of says it all.
Yeah, no one, absolutely no one likes him. And that's why I'm actually really excited about Colin Allred running against him down there in Texas. I mean, as much as I love Beto, it's nice to have somebody new in the mix. And I don't know, I think Colin Allred, a former football player in Texas, he's going to be able to play a game that Ted Cruz can't play. If he wants to play the man-up game, Colin Allred can do that.
He's already doing those ads. I mean, put him up next to Ted Cruz, this muscular, butt-kicking guy that was a tough football player, but also intellectually can run circles around Ted.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm very excited about it too because the map for us, if the bottom falls out for them because they're so horrible, then we could win anywhere, right? Like we've won some crazy seats. But the map for us, the Senate map, looks awful in 2024. And honestly, Texas and Florida may be our two best shots, with Rick Scott having only ever won another one who's loathsome and looks kind of like one of those, I think the guy that Will Smith was fighting against in Men in Black 2, who's sending the little versions of himself after him to attack him. He looks exactly like that. In any case, he's an alien. He's never won an election by more than 1.1%.
Yeah.
And in 3 elections, and the other 2 were like 0.03% and like 0.4%. Like, those are 2 seats. I know they're not blue states, and I know Florida has gone more into the reddish direction, and I know Texas is sort of purplish red, but we're going to have to compete in those 2 if we're going to hold on to the Senate, because, we've got seats up here in Ohio with Sherrod Brown. You mentioned Tammy Baldwin is up for reelection. I mean, we're going to have some tough seats, holding on to Tester in Montana, holding on to not really a Democrat, and Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Like, we've got some challenges. So.
In today's Middle East, the issues are getting more complex and the noise is getting louder. It takes a lot more to really understand what's going on. Al Monitor has established itself as an independent and trusted pulse of the Middle East, providing angles that you won't see anywhere else. We have committed to hiring hundreds of the top journalists and experts from across the region to keep our audiences up to date on the latest news and the trends to watch for. Decision makers on foreign policy and international business, global media, and top regional authorities regularly read Al Monitor, making it a one-stop shop for gaining a better grasp of the Middle East. And now, with the launch of Al Monitor Pro, we're using our expert network and new datasets to offer premium, actionable insights to business and policy professionals around the world. Pro offers expert memos, data-driven trend reports, industry monitoring, and special events covering trade and investment, energy, technology, food security, and more to help analysts do their job better. Join our community as we continue to grow.
Today in the Organic Kitchen, I'm going to show you a delicious way to make pizza in a pan.
Republicans say they won't cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But can honest, hard-working middle-class Americans really believe what these politicians say? Republicans said they wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade. Here's what Supreme Court Justices Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett said during their Senate confirmation hearings.
Roe v. Wade. It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. A good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court.
Roe v. Wade. It's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court.
Roe is not a super precedent, but that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled.
Well, we saw how that turned out. They played us for fools. Tell your elected officials to keep their hands off of our Social Security and healthcare benefits. Fool me once. Let Majority Rule was responsible for this message. LetMajorityRule.org is a project of the Marvin Lucas Super PAC, which is responsible for and paid for this ad and is not affiliated with or authorized by any political campaign or candidate or candidates committee.
I want to go back to the cap times and the quotations from State Senator Calderoy's Democrat. I got a couple of quotes and we'll wrap this little piece up. I do think, again, I quote Calderoy's, I do think we're seeing the last gasp of the Republican supermajority and the sort of stranglehold they've had on the legislature. And it's very scary for them, Roy said, referring to the court election, where a left-leaning majority could alter gerrymandered political maps. We also won't have to worry about the court further circumscribing voting rights for people because they're students or disabled or young or people of color, she said. Still, she said, change will come slowly. All this does is give Democrats the ability to compete. I'd start from that premise, Dom. I just want to.
Right.
It's not a slam dunk for us. We're not going to have a majority immediately or anything like what the Republicans have had for the last 12 years. An undemocratic lock on power is a minority party. But it is going to change the kind of people who get elected and how they get elected in the Republican Party, because it's not only going to be a contest amongst the super mega, the ultra mega, and the triple XL mega. They're going to need to actually be a diversity of thought, and that's good. It's good for all of us to hear from differing perspectives and be challenged from people, not just from the other side of the aisle, but from to have diversity from within the parties as well. As a state capitol reporter back in the 1980s, according to Paul Fanlin, I would have had a term for that. The norm. It used to be the norm. All that changed in, 2011. Scott Walker came into office, swept into office over opposition to Obamacare, of all damn things, and broke the maps and basically broke the state, broke democracy. And we've been living with the ramifications ever since, which is effectively, we're not supposed to have friendships with our neighbors. Our neighbors care more about hating on us, Dom, than they do about, being Wisconsinites. And I blame Scott Walker, and I blame the GOP. And Dom,
listen, I appreciate that, and certainly they are the drivers of it. But and I also blame the lack of voters. I also blame the lack of engagement. I also blame crappy voter turnout. Those things matter as well, and I'm just as guilty of that back in the day as anybody else. But come on, man, we get the government we deserve. We have 20% turning out in the Wisconsin Supreme Court primary election, and we're all celebrating that. I mean, come on, man. We get what we deserve. We assumed, in my opinion, good governance is just going to be there. Yeah, they'll fight back and forth over their thing, but it's always going to happen. That's not the case. We got disengaged, and the crazies took over the asylum.
Well, first and foremost, it was a spring primary election. It was record turnout for that, and I was quite satisfied with the general elective outcome when we had a hell of a lot of people turn out relative to a spring election. So if we had a primary apathetic turnout, man, so what? It really matters.
No, listen, you're missing the point. Those were historic turnouts. That was great, historically speaking. But it's still terrible as a percentage of the voting population engagement, man. I'm sorry. That's just the reality of it. If people turned out like they did in the final election all the time, we would not have had to go through these last 15 years.
Only if they voted for Democrats, Tom. Only if they vote for Democrats. It is only in the last 2 or 3 elective cycles that apparently the worm has turned here in the state of Wisconsin. And you can blame it on voter apathy of the left. I don't think that that's an accurate thing. I think if you look at the conduct of all of these politicians, especially the FU GOP party, I think they've driven this wedge for political purpose between neighbors. I think they want people to stick their head in the sand and want to walk away from politics, Don, because it is so contentious. What was Scott Walker? He was divide and conquer. He was 50+1. That's not the way the state used to run.
Well, and what is the benefit of people sticking their head in the sand for those that would use that kind of philosophy and politics to divide us? Because they know, Crudy, when more people show up, it's worse off for the conservatives. They know they've been saying it for 50 years.
Sure, I get all that, Dom. I think like 100,000 people showed up damn near every weekend during the political uprising here in the state of Wisconsin. And it was only through some reasonable independents, some people like you that said, well, I don't think we should recall the guy. I think he's got the right to his governance. No matter how bad we might find it to be, he's newly elected. This is his policies. Didn't run on him. Completely corrupted the campaign finance system. But of course, we didn't all know all of that, but I could see transparently. This guy was a charlatan and his governance was malfeasant. And I think it was a punch in the gut when Scott Walker won the recall, despite all of the bad things he did. It was a punch in the gut for the electorate because so many progressives, so many people of conscience, so many teachers, so many nice people. You know what? A lot of them moved the hell out of Wisconsin. They retired. They got out because of Act 10. State workers, not just the teachers. A lot of people did. And unfortunately, it doesn't help us fight the battle here in the state of Wisconsin. But as these kids, my son's generation, as they've turned of age, of voting age, what did we see this week, Dom? Earlier this week, you told me Madison had the highest youth turnout in the nation. 10-1, I believe it was, for Protasiewicz in the campus area. So, A, I think the kids are all right. B, I think people are certainly paying attention. But C, it is the attitude of these Republicans in some small part that made, once upon a time, dude, I was just like you. I barely voted in my 20s. In my 20s, I barely voted because didn't matter if the Democrat or the Republican won at the end of the day. Tommy Thompson was a Wisconsinite. He was a Badger first. I didn't like all of his policies, but I knew damn well that that guy wasn't in it to screw me. No, that was Scott Walker. And that was Robin Voss. And we are stuck with the FU GOP party ever since, Tom. But don't blame the lefty electorate, man. We fired up for Bernie Sanders in a spring primary, if I do recall, and we didn't get our preferred candidate, and Hillary didn't win the state of Wisconsin. Nor did she come here to campaign or any of the other things I would have done if I wanted to be the president of the frickin' United States. But that's a different story for a different day.
When we come back, Tom's final take on Kamala Harris.
As a career wide receiver, I've been hit hard. But no training nor practice prepared us for the devastation of COVID-19. Thankfully, there is hope. Even with multiple vaccines available, we still have to work together until everyone is safe. We all win when we unite to prevent.
Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. I hope you'll join me on my new audio podcast, Justice Matters. I'll be using my 30 years as a federal prosecutor and Army JAG to unpack, break down, and explain the legal issues of the day, particularly where the legal intersects with the political. Please look for Justice Matters with Glenn Kirshner wherever you generally get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hagedorn, and I'm the State Department correspondent at Al Monitor.
And I'm Joe Snell. I'm Al Monitor's video editor. Let's admit it, this past year has been difficult to stay on top of the news and sift through what's accurate and what's misleading. Let Al Monitor help you.
If you like this podcast and care about the Middle East and North Africa, you should consider listening to Al Monitor's other audio series, On the Middle East with Andrew Parasalibi and Amberin Zaman, and On Israel with Ben Caspi. You can subscribe to these series on your favorite podcast platforms.
And through a host of free daily and weekly newsletters, we offer a range of perspectives with the highest journalistic standards. You can subscribe to these newsletters at almonitor.com.
As an award-winning media service headquartered in Washington, D.C., Al Monitor has a network of over 160 contributors around the world.
So if you haven't done so already, be sure to visit almonitor.com, where you can find all of these newsletters and podcasts along with first-class reporting and analysis.
If you have not heard of the Sexy Liberal Podcasting Network, your podcasting superstation, you suck. I mean, we have the smartest, funniest liberals in the country. Stephanie Miller's Happy Hour. We have John Fugelsang. We have Hal Sparks, Frangela, Final Word, and Idiot of the Week. We have Bob Seska. Oh my God. We have Jody Hamilton from The Bunker. We have Start Me Up with Kimberly Johnson. We have Unprecedented. We have the smartest, funniest podcast, period. Get it now. SexyLiberal.com.
Houston. Hey, Cindy, what's on your mind?
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call again.
Sure.
I just wanted to put something out there, and I understand. I'm worried about Biden running again, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. I'm scared that the young adults out there, the 25, the 30-year-olds, they have to have some enthusiasm. Now, I'm going to bring up Bernie again, as I always do, because
Bernie
during
just
that
endorsed
time,
Biden, yesterday.
Yes, and that's good. But it still scares me because when Bernie was running, the enthusiasm that I saw on so many young adults, knowing that, you know what, it's a health care, it's education, it's signing up for all of us, making sure that those at the top pay what's right. Right, it's right. And so what scares me now is I'm worried. And yes, I'm going to vote for Biden. Of course I am. But I know that when it was Trump and Hillary, I was sick to my stomach even before it even happened, because I knew there were those out there that were not going to vote for Hillary.
Yeah, Bernie would have mopped the floor with Donald Trump.
Bernie, even Republicans would have went for Bernie.
Yep.
I would go anywhere. Anywhere I went, and I asked people, they said they don't like Trump, they'd vote for Bernie, but they're sure not going to vote for Hillary. And so right now, I know that I just wish, I'm going to get out to how I feel. I wish that the Democratic Party could understand that we need somebody out there, even younger. I'm going to agree, younger, get out there and to put those things that the American people need. It's not, forget it, get out there and stand as tall and proud as those ugly Republicans are, and stand for the opposite. Get out there and stand for health care, education. Get out there and stand up for what we need in America. And so for me right now, honestly, my stomach is kind of sick today because I'm kind of worried again. I'm worried about the next election, and that's just coming from me.
Yeah.
So
I think
the
big thing here is going to be the public perception of Kamala Harris. And she's been doing really good lately. She's taken some really strong positions. She's really coming across as a fighter. Frankly, I think her positions now are more progressive than they were, when she was running in the Democratic primary in 2020. I have in the past spoken disparagingly of her. Let's say not severely, but I've not been enthusiastic. I am becoming enthusiastic about Kamala Harris. I've watched now 2 of her speeches just in the last 3 days, and there's a very good chance that she'll end up president in the next 5 years. I mean, it's God forbid, knock wood and all that kind of stuff. But Joe Biden's going to be 86 when he leaves office, and there's a very good chance Kamala Harris is going to become president, and there's a high probability that she'll be the nominee for president in the election of 2028. So I think that we really need to be focusing on her and elevating her, holding her out for people, and saying, all about Joe Biden, you know who he is, his strengths, his weaknesses. The Willow Project, I know, has hurt him badly with the Gen Z. But I think Kamala Harris has the potential to be that person who's going to bring those people into the polling place. At least I hope so.
That is all the time we have for RFL today. For all of us here, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again tomorrow.